Hare Krishna, dear devotees, please accept my humble obeisances. Always Shila Prabhupada. I welcome you all to His Holy Candramauli Maharaj's daily call. I hope you all are well. Today's our host is Her Grace Gopika Radhika Mataji. Please accept my humble obeisances, Mataji. I hope you are well. Thank you so much for giving association and time on this call. So we have a very low participants today because most of the devotees are in India for Maharaj's retreat. However, a few will join little later. I hope they will join. So, and I might keep my cameras on because my internet is not so well today. There's some issues with the internet.
I was also having some issues. That's why I ended up joining a bit late. But yeah,
No, that's fine, Mataji. Absolutely okay. Thank you so much. And so would you like to share the screen or should I share the screen?
Yeah, that would be.
Okay, let me allow you to share the screen. Yes, you can share the screen.
Just no, it wasn't. It's visible, right, Mataji?
Yes, Mataji is visible.
So yeah, as it was shared in the WhatsApp group, we are reading 3 verses today. So it's 22, 23, and 24.
You can increase your volume, Mataji, a little bit. Volume is very faint.
Oh, okay. Is it better?
Yeah, this is better. Yeah, this is better.
Okay. Thank you. So yeah, we are reading 3 verses today, 22, 23, and 24. And 22, 23 don't have a purport. So we'll read through this and then verse 24 along with the purport. Okay, so Srimad Bhagavatam 115, 22, and 23. राजन्स्त्वयानुपृष्टानां सुहृदां न सुहृत्पुरे विप्रशाप विमूढानां निघ्नतां मुष्टिभिर्मिथः वारुणीं मदिरां पीत्वा मदोन्मथेत चेतसाम् अजानतामिवान्योन्यं चतुः पञ्चावशेषिताः. Translation. O King, since you have asked me about our friends and relatives in the city of Dwarka, I will inform you that all of them were cursed by the Brahmanas, and as a result, they all became intoxicated with wine made of putrefied rice and fought among themselves with sticks, not even recognizing one another. Now, all but 4 or 5 of them are dead and gone. So, referring to the Yadu dynasty. And then the next verse. प्रायेणैतद् भगवत ईश्वरस्य विचेष्टितं मिथो निघ्नन्ति भूतानि भावयन्ति च यन्मिथः. Translation. Factually, this is all due to the supreme will of the Lord, the personality of Godhead. Sometimes people kill one another, and at other times they protect one another. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. According to the anthropologists, there is nature's law of struggle for existence and survival of the fittest. But they do not know that behind the law of nature is the supreme direction of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In the Bhagavad Gita, it is confirmed that the law of nature is executed under the direction of the Lord. Whenever, therefore, there is peace in the world, it must be known that it is due to the good will of the Lord. And whenever there is upheaval in the world, it is also due to the supreme will of the Lord. Not a blade of grass moves without the will of the Lord. Whenever, therefore, there is disobedience of the established rules enacted by the Lord, there is war between men and nations. The surest way to the path of peace, therefore, is dovetailing everything to the established rule of the Lord. The established rule is that whatever we do, whatever we eat, whatever we sacrifice, or whatever we give in charity must be done to the full satisfaction of the Lord. No one should do anything, eat anything, sacrifice anything, or give anything in charity against the will of the Lord. Discretion is the better part of valor, and one must learn how to discriminate between actions which may be pleasing to the Lord and those which may not be pleasing to the Lord. An action is thus judged by the Lord's pleasure or displeasure. There is no room for personal whims. We must always be guided by the pleasure of the Lord. Such action is called yoga karma sukaushalam, or actions performed which are linked with the Supreme Lord. That is the art of doing a thing perfectly. So, right.
ॐ ज्ञानतिमिरान्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मीलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। नमः ॐ विष्णुपादाय कृष्णप्रेष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्तस्वामिनिति नामिने नमस्ते सारस्वतीदेवे गौरवाणी चारिणे निर्विशेषशून्यवादी पाश्चात्यदेशतारिणे वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपासिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम राम हरे।
So, yeah, just reading through the translations once more as a recap. O King, since you have asked me about our friends and relatives in the city of Dwarka, I will inform you that all of them were cursed by the Brahmanas. And as a result, they all became intoxicated with wine made of putrefied rice and fought among themselves with sticks, not even recognizing one another. Now, all but 4 or 5 of them are dead and gone. Factually, this is all due to the supreme will of the Lord, the personality of Godhead. Sometimes people kill one another, and at other times they protect one another. So I'll just share PPT that I prepared regarding this. So basically, yeah, reading through this, I mean, as always, there are just so many things that can be discussed. Srila Prabhupada, he always gives us so much to think about and discuss about in every single purport of his. But yeah, basically, these are the 3 points that I selected for our discussion in today's session, which is firstly that behind the law of nature, as Prabhupada says, is behind the law of nature is the supreme direction of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And then the second point, as Prabhupada says in the purport, that peace and upheaval both are due to the supreme will of the Lord. And then the third is that the surest path to peace is dovetailing everything with the Lord's rule. So, yeah, as we know, Arjun is describing what happened to the Yadu dynasty, to Maharaj Yudhishthir. And as we know, they all, except 4 or 5, as he says, all of them have basically annihilated each other. And so, yeah, this is one of the first things that Prabhupada mentions in the purport, that yes, there is the law of nature. That is basically undeniable. We see that even modern science acknowledges, right, the laws of nature. Basically, science is nothing but the study and the discovery, investigation, study, and application of the laws of nature. Because yes, there are laws, that is undeniable. There are consistent patterns, consistent laws, which always operate in a uniform way, and which we as puny human beings can hardly ever supersede or surpass. So science is all about discovering what these laws of nature are, how they work, and how we can then implement things, apply our activities in such a way that we can make use of these laws of nature to meet our ends, which is what technology is. But what modern science often fails to recognize is that behind the law of nature, there is also a lawmaker. So it's like a case of, someone coming to, a foreign country, and then they start to notice a pattern. Okay, like suppose no one knows that that person has no prior knowledge what the various traffic lights mean, that, red means stop and green means that you can go ahead. And suppose they have no prior idea of all these rules, and they come to this place and they see, okay, well, each time the light turns red, all the vehicles stop, and each time the light turns green, all the vehicles start moving. And after consistent observation for a long time, they start to draw conclusions. Okay, these are the laws. This law means this. When this happens, then this is the effect. When that happens, that is the effect. So they start recognizing laws. But supposing that such a person claims that these laws are all in all, there is no lawmaker. There is no one who has created these laws, and there is no one who is enforcing these laws. So of course, in our common daily life, such a conclusion would hardly make any sense. When there are laws, of course, those laws have been created by someone, And there's also someone who is maintaining and enforcing those laws and, giving out consequences to those who break those laws. And that is what our Vedic scriptures tell us as well, that just as we have laws at this micro level, then there are also macro level laws, which are the laws of nature. And then there's also the lawmaker, which is God himself. And Prabhupada, he would often give this really interesting example, which very nicely illustrates this point. He used to call it the Vrishchika Tandula Nyaya, wherein Vrishchika means basically scorpion and Tandula is rice. So Prabhupada said, this is just one instance. Prabhupada used to quote this many times in his teachings, lectures, etc. That sometimes we see some heaps of rice and the scorpion is coming out, of the scorpion, baby scorpions, they come out of heaps of rice. So, but that does not mean that the rice has given birth to the scorpion. From the rice, heaps of rice, one scorpion, small scorpion is coming. The fact is that the parent of the scorpion, they put their eggs within the rice and being fermented, the scorpion came. Not that from the rice, the scorpion is coming. So yeah, it very, very nicely illustrates this point, how there is actually intelligent design, there is life behind whatever, effects that we are seeing in this material world. Apparently, it may seem that the scorpion is just coming out of a mound of rice because see, there was just and this baby scorpion came out of it. But no, the scorpion is actually not coming from dead matter. It's not coming from just some grains of rice. There is life behind that life. And that life is the parent scorpion. And similarly, in the context of this world at large, the source of all the life that we see around us is the supreme life, which is Krishna. And the source of all the laws and patterns and symmetries and consistencies that we see in this material world is also that supreme, intelligent, conscious being, which is Krishna. And so therefore we see here, as Krishna says, very famous verse in the Gita, Sarva Yonishu Kaunteya Murteya Sambhavanti Yaha Tasam Brahma Mahad Yonir Aham Bija Pratah Pita. That, it should be understood that all species of life, O son of Kunti, are made possible by birth in this material nature, and that I am the seed-giving father. So the material nature is not all in all. The laws of material nature are not all in all. There is a person, a living, conscious person behind those laws, behind the material nature, who is actually controlling the material nature and its laws and enacting, bringing about all the effects. He is the original cause, who is behind all the effects that we see with our senses, perceive with our senses. And Krishna says this even more directly in this verse, as we know from the 9th chapter. Another verse that Prabhupada used to quote very often, Mayadhyakshena prakritehe soyate sacharacharam hetunanena kaunteya jagadve parivartate. That this material nature, which is one of my energies, is working under my direction, O son of Kunti, producing all moving and non-moving beings. Under its rule, this manifestation is created and annihilated again and again. So under, as we saw, the laws of nature. Those laws of nature, the rules of nature, they are creating and annihilating this manifestation again and again. But this nature, material nature itself, is but one of Krishna's energies, and it is Mayadhyakshena. It is working under Krishna's direction. So yes, behind the laws of nature is the hand of God. And we find this also very significantly at the beginning of, Vyasadev's composition of the Bhagavatam itself. As we know, after Vyasadev receives instructions and inspiration from his spiritual master Narad Muni, who points out, what is the defect in Vyasadev's endeavors so far, which was that, he had not glorified the Supreme Lord sufficiently and directly. And then Vyasadev sits down in meditation on the bank of the river Saraswati. And he, through his pure vision, he basically sees a blueprint of everything in existence. And that forms, the basis of his composition of the entire Bhagavatam. So the 7th chapter of our first canto, which we have already covered by now, it describes Vyasadev's vision when he sits down to meditate. And this is the first verse which, describes what Vyasdev saw. So it says that Bhakti Yogena Manasi Samyak Pranehite Male Apashyat Purusham Purnam Mayam Cha Tadapashraya. That thus he fixed his mind, that is Vyasdev, he fixed his mind, perfectly engaging it by linking it in devotional service, Bhakti Yoga, without any tinge of materialism. And thus he saw the absolute personality of Godhead along with his external energy, which was under full control. So Vyasdev has this really unique, vision in his meditation where he is seeing everything that the entire existence comprises of. So he sees the Lord, and because he sees the Lord, that means he also sees the Lord's internal energy, because Krishna is never separated from his internal energy. Seeing Krishna means seeing Krishna along with, all his internal associates, plenary portions, expansions, his direct expansions, etc. That is why it says Purusham Purnam, complete personality of Godhead. And then, so we have Krishna, we have all his internal potencies, and then we have Maya, which is Krishna's external potency. And he specifically sees Maya as being under the full control of Krishna. And then the next verse actually goes on to further describe Yaya sammohito jiva atmanam trigunatmakam paropi manote nartham tat kritam chabhipadyate. That due to this external energy, the living entity, although transcendental to the three modes of material nature, thinks of himself as a material product and thus undergoes the reactions of material miseries. So yeah, this is our condition, right? We are transcendental, just like the Lord and his internal potency. We are also inherently transcendental, but unlike the Lord, who is the controller of the material energy, we jivas come under the control of the external energy. When we turn away from the Lord, we become subordinate to the external energy. And therefore, then we undergo the reactions of material miseries. So yeah, a very, very clear cut, I like to think of this basically as the theory of everything. Like we have, there's always been this endeavor in science to somehow come up with the theory of everything. One theory which, explains the entire existence, encapsulates the entire existence. We have basically the theory of everything so succinctly presented in the Bhagavatam in its very first canto. There's the Lord, there's his internal energy, there is Maya, the external energy, and then there are we, jivas, living entities, who are the marginal energy. And the external energy is under the Lord's control. We are transcendental, but when we turn away from the Lord, we come under the external energy's control. And so, yes, again, highlights the same point that the external energy, the laws of nature, material nature is subordinate to Krishna. And we also, when we turn away from Krishna, then we also come under the subordination of and under the clutches of this material energy. And that is why the only way basically to become liberated from the entanglement of the clutches of material energy is to take shelter of Krishna, because Krishna is the only one who can control material energy. And therefore, as Prabhupada says here in the introduction to Bhagavad Gita, when we see wonderful things happening in the cosmic nature, we should know that behind this cosmic manifestation, there is a controller. Nothing could be manifested without being controlled. It is childish not to consider the controller. For instance, a child may think that an automobile is quite wonderful to be able to run without a horse or other animal pulling it. But a sane man knows the nature of the automobile's engineering arrangement. He always knows that behind the machinery, there is a man, a driver. Similarly, the Supreme Lord is the driver under whose direction everything is working. And so this is the broader and the deeper perspective that we are fortunate to get from our Vedic literatures, which basically take us beyond the superficial surface view of things. And that is why things make so much better sense to the devotee, and the devotee is able to handle the ups and downs of life and just things in general in this material world in a much better, in a much more mature and much more with much more equanimity. A devotee is able to handle these things because a devotee is able to understand the rhyme and reason behind all these things. that we are seeing externally. Behind everything, there is actually the hand of the Lord. And the Lord is all good. He has a certain purpose in mind, which is ultimately for the benefit of the living entity. A devotee is able to recognize all these things. And then that is why a devotee is able to maintain equilibrium in all kinds of situations. And also able to have a deeper and broader, a more helicopter sense of view regarding everything that's happening. So this was, the first point that I thought to discuss that comes out from today's section of verses and purports. Because Arjun, he's describing this really, he's breaking this devastating piece of news to Maharaj Yudhishthir, which is, it's for them, like for the Pandavas, what could be more devastating than this? It's the ultimate devastating piece of news. But then, even then, behind all this, there is this there's this underlying strand of, acceptance, because of understanding that it is the Lord's will. So, as I said, devotees, they don't just get thrown off balance by unexpected things happening, unpleasant things happening, because ultimately the devotee then recognizes, okay, whatever has happened, but it is ultimately because of the will of the Lord. The Lord has a plan. The Lord has the will behind this. And that is why then the devotee is able to maintain peace and equilibrium. So this was the first point. And then the second point which stood out to me from today's section was how both peace and upheaval are due to the supreme will of the Lord. Because, as Arjun says in today's verse, right, in verse 24, that it is by the Lord's will that men protect each other, and it is by his will that they kill each other. So both ways, ultimately, it's Krishna's hand. And we see this, of course, for example, in the Virat Roop of Krishna as well, right? Krishna demonstrates to Arjun. Arjun basically sees, all these people who had assembled on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, all of them being devoured by Krishna's universal form. And what Krishna informs Arjun is that it doesn't really matter whether you choose to battle or not, because my will is that all these people will be wiped out. So they will be wiped out anyway. Now, what you can do is that you can choose to become an instrument in my plan. And that will be to your credit. But otherwise, yes, Krishna has a certain plan. He has a certain will, and that does come to pass no matter what. And that applies to peace as well as upheaval. And of course, because it is Krishna's plan, therefore the so-called upheaval is also ultimately, it works out for the overall benefit of all the living entities of the entire planet Earth. So, as we see here, in context of this particular thing that we are reading just now about the Yadu dynasty being wiped out, annihilating one another, we see that, Krishna, at the time of his advent, like this is right from the first chapter of the Krishna book, we see that all the demigods, right, headed by Lord Brahma, they approach Lord Vishnu. And what was their plea? The plea was that the world was overburdened by the unnecessary defense force of different kings who were actually demons, but were posing themselves as the royal order. And so therefore the whole world was perturbed, and Bhumi Devi, which is the goddess Earth, she approaches Lord Brahma. And as we know, Lord Brahma, he becomes very much aggrieved, and he starts for the ocean of milk where Lord Vishnu resides. And he petitions Lord Vishnu, prays to him. And then, of course, Krishna chooses to appear in this world, on this planet. So, this was at the very beginning of Krishna's advent. This is the scene that is set, that, okay, the earth is overburdened. Lord Vishnu is requested to please remove this burden. And therefore, then Krishna, Swayam Bhagwan Krishna, he makes his appearance. Now, as we know, throughout the time that Krishna was manifest to people's eyes on this planet Earth, which was approximately 125 years, right from the beginning, right, from the time Krishna made his appearance, he was killing demons non-stop. So, non-stop, this activity of removing the burden of earth was going on. So beginning right from Putana and onwards, ultimately to Kansa and then Jarasan. And then the penultimate thing was when Krishna makes the Pandavas instruments in wiping out all those kings in the Battle of Kurukshetra, which was a massive, massive, decimation of the burden of earth. So in one sense, it seems like pretty much the entire task has been accomplished. All the burden of earth has been wiped out, and everything is fine and normal now. Krishna, whatever mission was there for Krishna, external mission of Krishna's appearance has been accomplished. But then our acharyas tell us, and Bhagavatam tells us, that there was still one burden remaining. And this was the Lord's reasoning over here. It comes in the 11th canto, first chapter, where the Supreme Personality of Godhead, it's stated in verses 3 and 4, that he used the Yadu dynasty, which was protected by his own arms, to eliminate the kings who with their armies had been the burden of this earth, right? This is what was done throughout the time of Krishna's being here on this planet. But then, now finally, the unfathomable Lord thought to himself, although some may say that the earth's burden is now gone, in my opinion, it is not yet gone, because there still remains the Yadav dynasty itself, whose strength is unbearable for the earth. So this was basically Krishna's, final stroke of completely, unburdening the earth before he wraps up his pastimes from the vision of earthly beings. So Lord Krishna thought that no outside force could ever bring about the defeat of this family, the Yadu dynasty, whose members have always been fully surrendered to me and are unrestricted in their opulence. But if I inspire a quarrel within the dynasty, that quarrel will act just like a fire created from the friction of bamboo in a grove, and then I shall achieve my real purpose and return to my eternal abode. So this was, yes, Krishna's reasoning and his planning, behind this whole enactment of, one Yadu member killing another Yadu member, and in this way, the whole dynasty getting annihilated. So it was a conscious, again, the Lord's will is behind everything. This was a conscious decision by Krishna, a thoughtfully executed decision. And our acharyas give us certain specific reasons behind this, why Krishna chose to act in this way. So this is taking from the BBT Purport to the third verse in the first chapter of 11th canto, based on the Acharya's commentaries. So one thing was that Lord Krishna detected that by their intimate association with him, some members of the Yadu dynasty had become indifferent to his will. So our acharyas, they always introduce us to many different angles of vision in terms of, understanding a particular verse or a particular section of the scriptures. So this is one angle that we are getting out of many. This is not the only one. That, because familiarity breeds contempt. So some members of the Yadu dynasty had become indifferent to Krishna's will. So Krishna basically wanted to curb that, because otherwise there was the danger of them setting a bad example for others, because they are Krishna's own family, and if they act in ways which they are not supposed to be acting in, then other people will think, okay, that means Krishna permits this. Krishna allows this to happen. These are his own family members who are acting in this way. So it has Krishna's approval, so we can also act in this way. So that was one reasoning of Krishna's, one angle of looking at this. Then another angle, which our acharyas tell us about, is that the members of Yadu dynasty are eternal associates of the Lord, and they cannot bear to be separated from the Lord. And because Krishna was preparing to give up his earthly pastimes, they would surely become so disturbed by his absence that in their highly agitated state of mind, they would trample and destroy the earth. So this is another angle of vision that we are given by our acharyas, that this situation of Krishna departing before the Yadu dynasty would have been completely intolerable for the Yadu dynasty. So they had to leave before Krishna left, because otherwise they would just trample and destroy the whole earth in their transcendental ecstasy of separation from Krishna. So that was another reason why Krishna had to basically orchestrate their annihilation before his personal disappearance. And then we have another angle, which is Jiva Goswami concludes that ultimately the members of the Yadu dynasty are never to be considered irreligious. Within the three worlds, so okay, they are never to be considered irreligious. So then what was the reason behind their being destroyed in such a manner? So here is the reasoning. Within the three worlds, there were none as powerful and opulent as the Yadu dynasty. So their sudden disappearance through fratricidal war is meant to impress upon the conditioned souls the temporary nature of this world. So this is, yes, another really significant point that we get in this from Jiva Goswami. That yes, of course, as we know, the Yadu dynasty, they were unrivaled, right? I mean, they are Krishna's own family. So who could be safer and more protected, more opulent, more just, yeah, super excellent in every way than the Yadu dynasty? And so Krishna wanted to show conditioned souls that actually see even such a dynasty is ultimately met with destruction. Even such a dynasty is ultimately annihilated. So there's absolutely nothing which is completely permanent and assured in this material world. So that was another point. And then, of course, we have this principle that the setting of the sun does not mean the end of the sun. It means that the sun is out of our sight. So similarly, the end of the mission of the Lord on a particular planet or universe only means that he is out of our sight. So the end of Yadu dynasty also does not mean that it is annihilated. It disappears along with the Lord out of our sight. So yeah, of course, that was something which Prabhupada always emphasized again and again, that the Lord's so-called disappearance is not actually his disappearance altogether. It is just disappearance from our vision. Just as the sun is always shining, but it's just that some, after every 12 hours, it disappears from our vision for 12 hours. And we call that night. But it's not that the sun has gone somewhere. The sun is right there. It's shining. It's just, not in our purview. It's not in our range of vision anymore for that duration. And so the same applies to the Lord's associates, including the Yadu dynasty. So we get some of these fascinating insights regarding the Lord's will behind the Yadu dynasty's annihilation. And this was, of course, specific to the Lord's own family members, who, as we know, are special. But then this also applies to basically everything in this material world. All the wars, all the instances of peace, everything in this material world is ultimately orchestrated by the will of the Lord. And therefore, as Prabhupada says here, that the surest way to peace and prosperity is to dovetail everything with the rule and will of the Lord. And of course, as we know, that is the peace formula that Bhagavad Gita gives us in the last verse of the 5th chapter. Bhoktaram yagya tapasam sarvaloka maheshwaram suhritam sarvabhutanam gyatva mam shantim richati. That, one who understands Krishna as Bhoktaram yagya tapasam, the supreme beneficiary of all sacrifices and austerities, Sarvaloka Maheshwaram, the supreme controller of all planets and demigods, and Sarvaloka Maheshwaram, Suhridam Sarvabhutanam, and the well-wisher of all living entities. One who knows that, Gyatva Mam Shantim Richati, that person attains peace. And why does such a person attain peace? Because then that person, his or her orientation is correct. That person knows, okay, who is the Supreme Lord? Who is the person unto whom all my activities need to be directed, unto whom all the fruits of my activities need to be offered? Who is supposed to be the ultimate goal of everything that I think and do and desire for? And so such a person then is automatically then able to dovetail his or her activities in the service of the Lord and in accordance with the rules of the Lord. And that is the yagya formula that we also get in the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 3, where Krishna says, yagyarthat karmano nyatra lokoyam karma bandhana tadartham karma kaunteya mukta sangha samachara. And then in the purport in 3.11, Prabhupada talks about the cycle of prosperity brought about by yagya. That by performance of yagya, one's eatables become sanctified. Yagya does not necessarily mean just the ritualistic performance of a home. That is definitely one form of yagya, but yagya also means just the overall principle of offering everything that one does in the service of the Lord. That is sacrifice. So yeah, it's not necessarily that only when we light a fire and we perform ahuti, that's not the only process of performing yajna. We are also performing, one can be performing yajna in one's school or university or office or one's household life. Just in every sphere of activity, one can be performing yajna. If one recognizes that, okay, whatever I'm doing it for the purpose of glorifying and serving the Lord and using the fruits of my activities for the Lord's service. So Prabhupada says here that by performance of yajna, one's eatables become sanctified, and by eating sanctified foodstuffs, one's very existence becomes purified. And by the purification of existence, finer tissues in the memory become sanctified. And when memory is sanctified, one can think of the path of liberation. And all these combined together lead to Krishna consciousness, the great necessity of present-day society. And then in the very next verse, Purport Srila Prabhupada says that if we forget the purpose of human life and simply take supplies from the agents of the Lord for sense gratification and become more and more entangled in material existence, which is not the purpose of creation, certainly we become thieves, and therefore we are punished by the laws of material nature. A society of thieves can never be happy. So yeah, as we saw, this dual nature, the path to peace is to align oneself with the Lord, and similarly upheavals are caused when one is not aligned with the rules of the Lord. And why is that? Because when one is not aligned with the Lord's rules, then one is basically a thief, because non-stop we are using materials which are supplied by Krishna. We cannot even live for one single moment without using the natural bounties that Krishna has supplied us with. So if we don't recognize Krishna, that it's Krishna who is giving us all these things, that it's the Lord who is giving us all these things, then we are a society of thieves, which by default can never be happy. And therefore we see, like Bhagavatam gives us so many instances, like for example, Prithu Maharaj, right? In our Vedic civilization, people always had this understanding that whenever there is an upheaval or there is a phase of prosperity, they understood the real principle, the real reason behind this. Again, it was going beyond the surface level view of things and penetrating to the deeper reality behind the phenomenon that we observe. So as we see Prithu Maharaj's case, the citizens, they approach him saying that we are performing our duties, but still we are not getting any harvest. The earth is not producing any food grains and we are starving due to want of food grains. And Prithu Maharaj, he understands that, okay, yes, my citizens are performing their duties and still the earth is not supplying as she is supposed to be supplying. So what is the reason? And he becomes really angry. And as we know, he goes after Mother Earth, Bhumi Devi, with his bow and arrows, to punish her for this transgression, because that is the rule, that the citizens, they perform their duties and then the earth, it is supposed to reciprocate by yielding food grains. And then Bhumi Devi, this is the reasoning that she gives to Prithu Maharaj, that not only are grains and herbs being used by non-devotees, but as far as I'm concerned, I'm not being properly maintained. Indeed, I'm being neglected by kings who are not punishing these rascals, who have turned into thieves by using grains for sense gratification. And consequently, I have hidden all these seeds, which are meant for the performance of sacrifice. And then she goes on to say that, and they have been stocked for a very long time because she was keeping them hidden. And so these grain seeds have become deteriorated. And therefore, she advises Prithu Maharaj to, follow the standard procedure for extracting those bounties back from the earth. So again, both all of them, the citizens, the king, Mother Earth, all of them are speaking at a much, much deeper level than we are usually accustomed to think about things in our modern society, which is a very mechanistic way of thinking. Here, everyone is recognizing that the reason behind prosperity or the lack of prosperity has something to do with the actual conduct of people and to what degree they are following the Lord's rules. It's not just a mechanical matter of, what quality of seeds do I use and what quality of agricultural equipment do I have. It's not just about that. There are principles operating at a deeper level and which are connected with the Lord's rules. And that is why, as Prabhupada says here, if one is mistaken if he thinks that by applying modern machines such as tractors, grains can be produced. This is not the only determining criteria behind a good harvest. And Prabhupada says if one goes to a desert and uses a tractor, there is still no possibility of producing grains. And so Prabhupada goes on to say, the earth has already explained that because non-devotees are enjoying the production of food, she has reserved food seeds for the performance of sacrifice. And atheists will not believe in the spiritual method of producing grains, but whether they believe or not, the fact remains that we are not independent to produce grains by mechanical means. And so, and this applies basically to all spheres of our life, both material and spiritual. Behind everything is the will of the Lord and the rule of the Lord. And to the degree that we harmonize ourselves with those broader, bigger rules, to that degree, we'll be successful in our endeavors, whatever be those endeavors, not just spiritual, even material endeavors. They can be successful only when those activities are harmonized with the higher rules of the Lord. And therefore, we see that in Yudhishthira Maharaj's reign, for instance, we have this beautiful description. In the 10th canto, this is also a section of verses which we have already covered in our Bhagavatam series so far, that during the reign of Maharaj Yudhishthira, the clouds showered all the water that people needed, and the earth produced all the necessities of man in profusion. Due to its fatty milk bag and cheerful attitude, the cow used to moisten the grazing ground with milk. The rivers, oceans, hills, mountains, forests, creepers, and active drugs in every season paid their tax quota to the king in profusion. And because of the king's having no enemy, the living beings were not at any time disturbed by mental agonies, diseases, or excessive heat or cold. So, incredible description. And, all this is happening by dint of the king's virtue. So how amazing is that? And again, it goes to show that the mechanistic explanation of universe is not all in all. Just by the kings being virtuous, then living entities in his kingdom were not even having mental agonies or diseases or excessive heat or cold. How does that happen? It's because, nature starts to cooperate. And nature starts to cooperate because the people who are utilizing the bounties of nature are aligned with the will of the Lord. And nature itself is under the control of the will of the Lord. And therefore, then, we get complete harmony. And as a result, we get complete peace and prosperity, even on this material plane. And therefore, as we would have heard, in Prabhupada's, I think it was in 1972, November 1972, when Prabhupada went with a team of his disciples to South India, Hyderabad specifically, where they, for a series of days, they had pandal programs every evening. Thousands of visitors used to come and listen to Prabhupada lecture. Just like the Bombay pandals, we had pandals in Hyderabad. And during the day, devotees used to go about in the city doing Harinam. And that was during a time when Hyderabad had actually been facing a prolonged drought for some time. But within days of Prabhupada and his disciples, like within a couple of days or something of them arriving in Hyderabad and performing all these preaching activities, there was very plentiful rainfall. And it was even noted in some local newspapers that this is, in all likelihood, this is because of, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada arriving and performing Harinam with all his disciples and lecturing on Bhagavad Gita. So, even in the local newspapers, this was recognized that this is, in all likelihood, this was the fact. And then, of course, when Prabhupada was told about that newspaper article, Prabhupada did confirm that that was indeed the case. So, contemporary examples as well of how, peace and prosperity, abundance, all these things, even at a material level, they are achieved by performing yajna, basically. Harinam, as we know, is Kali Yuga's Yajna, and therefore, we have this great advantage and blessing in Kali Yuga, where, as we know, Kala Dosha Nidhe Rajan Asti Eka Mahatguna Kirtana Deva Krishna Mukta Sangha Param Prajna. Kali Yuga is an ocean of faults, but there is one good quality, and which is that one can get the ultimate perfection just by Kirtana Deva Krishna, and that is the Sankirtan Yajna, which we can all perform without any need of any ingredients, any paraphernalia, no restrictions of time, place, purity, impurity, just anything, and we get the supreme benefit at all levels, both in this life and so. Thank you so much, Mataji. I'll conclude here.
Thank you so much, Gopika Radhika Mataji. This was so nice presentation, very nice, very nicely delivered. You covered so many points, different points about the will of the Lord, the relationship between the Lord and the external energy, and we as jivas, and who is controlling whom, and when do we come in the control of the external energy. And you also covered that why did Krishna actually destroyed the Yadu dynasty? What was the reason? And quite a lot of points came out of that, and which was very interesting to hear them. And I always wondered that Krishna being so passionate, how could he do that to his own family, and and so nicely covered. So that gives some reassurance to me. Thank you. And the last points about that why it's important to do the sacrifices as a Nam Sankirtan and preaching, and what is the effect between how does the prosperity and peace comes a bit peace and uphill. So thank you ever so much. I love hearing your classes. You're just amazing. Devotees, if you have any questions, you're too humble, Mataji. If you have any questions, devotees, please comment question or your realizations on the different points which Mataji has explained. If you can't talk, you can please type it in the chat, and I'm happy to read those questions for Mataji. And it will be nice to have your darshan as well. If you can keep your cameras on too, please. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
We have a really beautiful comment here in the chat.
Yeah.
And someone has written, I apologize, I don't know the name of this devotee, that in Yagyas we offer wealth, and in Sankirtan Yagya we offer ourselves. Yeah, that's such a beautiful insight. So true, so true. Thank you.
And this is our Vrisha Prabhu. I think Vrisha Prabhu, if I'm not wrong, he's Guru Maharaj's personal servant for a number of years. Very nice comment, Prabhu. Thank you. Anyone else? So I want to ask you one question, Mataji, about the last few paragraphs which we mentioned about about Prithu Maharaj's pastime and how Mother Earth, stopped giving the prosperity to the basically to the kingdom, and how Prithu Maharaj got angry. So I wanted to check with you, in material world, in the current situations, we see that many people, they are very, living their life basically under sense gratification. Whatever they have, they only think of themselves, like only, when we go for book distribution, we have set our mindset that, the bigger the house, the miserly the people are. We don't even go and knock on those doors, and that is like literally every book distributor knows that there is no point knocking on this door. But the prosperity continue to increase, the situations and everything. And so I'm assuming everything that comes in their life, that is because of their pious deeds.
Yes, Mataji, you're right. And yes, this pattern is definitely I'm sorry, were you going to say something more?
No, that's what I want to ask, that how come that and also the next time I hear the story that Lakshmi ji has also cursed the Brahmanas. So we usually see that Vishnu's devotees are kind of as not as opulent or wealthy as the people who are enjoying and using their wealth in this for the sense gratification. So why there is the imbalance?
Yeah, no, that's a pertinent point, and I'm just thinking there is one particular reference which is really relevant for this, but I don't remember it clearly enough to pull it up right now. But basically, we in our in Srimad Bhagavatam and Prabhupada's purpose, Prabhupada does draw a distinction between two kinds of opulences, and one is the kind of opulence which is derived, as you said, from just from the mechanical cycle of karma. One has performed some pious activities in a previous life, and therefore mechanically, one is reaping the good results of that. And in this particular life, one may not necessarily be a devotee or even a very pious person. One may in fact be a rather impious person, but because of the mechanistic law of karma, one is reaping the past results. As we know, that silo example, right? That we put in good grain and then we put bad grain. So right now we are putting bad grain, but what is coming out at the other end is good grain, right? This example which Prabhupada used to often give. So this is one aspect. This is one kind of opulence. But then there is another kind of opulence which is achieved directly because of the Lord's benediction. And that is the kind of opulence, even in terms of just concrete material opulence, not just spiritual opulence, but even material opulence, but which is derived as a result of the Lord's benediction. And that is the kind of opulence which devotees enjoy. And that is what we see, for example, in the case of Dhruv Maharaj or, Prahlad Maharaj or Bali Maharaj. All these personalities, they also had, opulent kingdoms, long reigns where they ruled over large, planets or even the entire world for very, very long periods of time. But that was very distinct from, for example, the kind of, phases of opulence that the demons would have. There would be a brief phase we hear in the Bhagavatam, right? When the demons would become very powerful, they would supersede the demigods would get overthrown. And so there's a brief spell of prosperity. And then after some time, the Lord, again, either through his incarnation or through some other arrangement, he works to overthrow the demons and reinstate the demigods. So that is the difference, basically, between these two kinds of opulences. That there is, opulence which is a product of Maya and opulence which is a product of Vishnu, Vishnu's mercy, Krishna's mercy. And so that kind of opulence is what a devotee gets, which is far more stable, it's permanent, and it does not cause one's downfall. Like Dhruv Maharaj, we see his ambition was to get a kingdom which was even greater than his great-grandfather. And his great-grandfather happens to be Lord Brahma himself. So how much higher can you get? But he does, Lord Vishnu, he does bless him with that kind of opulence, which supersedes even Lord Brahma. But despite that, he does not have a fall down. He enjoys that opulence, and at the same time, at the end of his life, he gets to go back to Godhead. So that is the sort of, really stable and like mode of, transcendental sort of opulence that a devotee enjoys, even in this life, when they get it by the Lord's mercy, as opposed to this opulence by Maya. It just makes one very puffed up, very arrogant. It dilutes one's discrimination between right and wrong, causes one's downfall, often causes a lot of mental distress, mental stress, anxieties about keeping it intact, all these things. And ultimately, it's not permanent either, neither in this life nor in the next. And sometimes even if it lasts for this entire lifetime, then it does not last after death. So yeah, there we do find a description of, two very distinct kinds of even material opulence. So this one is not really material opulence at all, because it's a direct gift from Krishna, and that is what devotees enjoy.
Thank you so much, Mataji. That clarifies a lot. Very nicely explained. Thank you.
Thank you, Mataji. I'll try to see if I find that reference. I'll share it as well.
Yeah. No, that's fine. You explained it so nicely, so it's okay. Thank you. Any other questions, devotees? So while we're waiting, Mataji, I've got one more question about the Yadu dynasty, and I wanted to ask, that a different thing happened to different devotees when Krishna left. As we see that Krishna instructed Uddhava to stay here in Badrika Ashram, and then Krishna instructed, not instructed, but Pandavas, they retire and they go for the meditation to Himalayas. And I'm not sure what happened to the Brajvasis, what happened after Krishna left, but different. And Yadu dynasty is, Krishna's his own children. That's what he planned to do it by quarreling between them. So how come this different things happen to different? How come not everyone went peacefully to the Krishna's eternal abode?
Okay, yeah. I guess kind of like what we see in, for example, Lord Rama's pastimes, right? The whole of
Yeah.
his kingdom. We find this description that they all go back to Godhead, right? Along with Lord Ram.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's here. Yeah, I guess, of course, Krishna's plans are mysterious. So there's no telling exactly why he does a certain thing. But one thing, as we saw perhaps, in today's purport is that, as Prabhupada says, Krishna wanted to impress upon conditioned souls, the temporary nature, the miserable nature of this material world. So that could be an underlying feature behind all these, apparently very jarring circumstances that all these personalities met with. That, no matter how powerful or strong or pious or whatever you are, there is no knowing what's around the corner for us. And this material world is a temporary place. It's a miserable place. There's danger at every step. So just as a kind of reminder to we conditioned souls, Krishna perhaps orchestrated, because that is one, right? That's one angle that our acharyas bring in. So that is probably the reason behind all these personalities leaving in these apparently not so peaceful ways.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thanks. That helps. Thank you. And Rishabh Prabhu has commented also that false ego is called false because we are identifying with the temporary. It is a source of suffering, unavailable. Sorry. Yes, source of suffering, unavailable. Thank you.
Right.
Thanks for the comment, Prabhu. Thank you. I'm not sure if there are any other questions or comments now. So we can close the call now. Thank you so much, Mataji, again for your time in association. It's always really appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Mataji. Thank you so much for your time.
Vanchakalpatarubhescha kripa sindhubhevcha patitanam pamnebhyo vaishnavyo namo namo. Jai Shila Prabhupada ki jai, Guru Maharaj ki jai.